I am exhausted. How are you? So, for future reference, today is November 4th, 2020, and it is the day after the 2020 presidential election. More than just the president was being voted on, but hey, you know. And I have to apologize because I said this episode was going to be the start of the analog side of the studio, and unfortunately, that's going to have to be next week. Presuming I can still find plywood in this city. It's not as bad as some other places, so I don't think that's going to be a problem. But I did hear there was sort of a national shortage of plywood. So I probably exhausted for a lot of the same reasons you guys are, but also it's a national, it's a federal election. We cover it. And KTQA covers it, but we cover it with some other stations. We covered it with Radio Tacoma 101.9 here in Tacoma. I'm also one of their engineers as well. And then for the first time, we were 3 stations, the third one being VT Radio Universal, which is a Spanish-English Spanglish language streaming radio station here in Tacoma. There's a guy over there named Chris who you may meet one day here on the channel. Great guy, fun working with everybody. But so that's what we did. So I had to build a social distancing aware live studio, and then use it for a day, and then immediately tear it down so we could get back to work on the studio. We had to do it in this space. And so we used my live kit, which required some doing because I didn't think I would be using my live kit at all this year, what with most live performances being kind of a bad idea. So I had to rebuild some of it, just in time for the studio. That actually required a lot more coding than you might expect. And prepare it, use it, then tear it down. So a bit of a cut here. I was originally going to show the time-lapse of the building and the teardown of the studio in this video, but then I realized just how well it fit to the Best Song Masochist, and I'm like, ooh, I wonder if I could do that. So I split it off into its own video, and I'd like to thank Bess very much for use of the song. I really appreciate it. That was more fun than it had any right to be on such a low-energy post-big event day. But, so, after splitting that off into its own episode, I realized I still had this other material that I wanted to show you guys before I went off into the land of audio and the land of analog. So, that's what this episode is. We're going to look at a couple pieces of equipment that I filmed for an original episode 4, which is now going to be episode 6. And then, so that's what we have for you. And then next week, we dive into all this stuff here. Should be a lot of fun. So let's get to it. So, not necessarily a part of this episode, but something I should talk about. This is new Cobble. This is the machine what will be replacing Cobble when it happens. I bought it from a recycler. It is a... Can you see it? There we go. It is a checkpoint firewall router thingy. I don't know. I read about it online, and it looked like it had a whole bunch of interfaces, but was otherwise a regular PC on the inside. I've heard of Checkpoint, but I've never really worked with it. They're big enough that, as it turns out, they can fabricate their own motherboard designs, as you can sort of see here. Comes with a Western Digital Enterprise class drive, which is going to be coming out because I have an SSD I'm going to install, because why have a mechanical drive at this point if you're going to... Why have a mechanical drive at this point, full stop? So what it seems to be is some sort of earlier Pentium class machine. It has 4 gig of DDR3 RAM in it. It has a passive heatsink with some ducted fan work on the inside. Yeah, there you go. And that's fairly standard for a 1U machine. It has a whole bunch of gigabit Ethernet ports on it. I can guarantee, and it includes one console port that's done up in the Cisco RJ45 style on the board. So I was able to connect to it, and I was even able to load the Arch Linux boot image on it. So I was able to do that. So this is clearly a PC, and it saw 8 gigabit ports on it. I'll probably put up some sort of thing. Which way is down? Yeah, this way is down. There'll be something here about what kind of machine it is. But what I did notice is that it's got this blue header here, which I found kind of interesting. Because blue headers like that sometimes, to me, denote the existence of some sort of VGA video on it, because this thing is designed to run headless, and in fact, I intend to run it that way, but just for kicks, I did grab a VGA thing. So I'm going to plug it into a video card, or I'm going to plug it in and then plug it into a monitor, not a video card, what am I thinking, and see what happens. All right? Yeah, let's do that. Alrighty, so here we are set up for that. Plugged in over there. I haven't tried this yet, so we're going to discover it together, and if it explodes and something smokes, then it'll be fun for everybody. One thing I have discovered, though, which I might show you later, is that this LCD thing on the front, actually fairly easy to talk to. These send individual letters, and then this, it just displays whatever's sent to it on a serial port. And this is it right here. Fairly standard serial header. So let's see what happens. Let's plug this guy in. Oh, does it not? I'm thinking this isn't going to work. I didn't look closely enough. It doesn't even fit. Oh, well, look at that. Might be another console port, might be something else entirely. Who knows? I thought that was going to work. Yeah, it's one set of pins short. God, who knew? Well, the fact of the matter is, I thought that was going to be VGA. It might even still be VGA. LSPCI on Arch suggested that it's got some onboard graphics capabilities, given the chipset. I mean, they're not going to fab their own. They might fab their own motherboard, but it's not like they're going to, fab the entire chipset. Yeah, that's basically it. I'm going to put OpenBSD on it now. I'll show you a picture when it's in the rack, which will be, yeah. Here's a picture. Yay! GoPro turn off. All right, I turned that off. Disabled that. All right, so here we are in a bit of a Ashens or Big Clive style, which I happen to like because you don't have to look at me, but I get to do stuff, and I can show things off a little bit easier. I've been doing this a little bit in the last couple of episodes, but I didn't have like a dedicated setup. So I'm turning part of my desk into a dedicated setup for this. This is the first version, and rather than immediately do something, I'd like to do a little bit of a test recording, but I might as well show you something while I'm at it. So one thing the rack doesn't have that I would like it to have is a PDU or remote rebooter, depending on, call it what you want to call it, depending on where you are or what kind of things it does. But basically something that allows me to remotely reboot things. I have one at the transmitter site. I'd like to have one here. There aren't any showing up in my usual e-recycler places, and the only one I really have is this guy. And if you're from, if you were in a rack room in the late 90s, you probably saw one of these, mid to late 90s. This is a Baytech RPC3. Really easy to configure. Really easy to reconfigure because it's really insecure. I've used a ton of these over the years. Not so much lately as you might expect, but I had this one lying around because I saw it and I picked it up. It was cheap. It was $10, as is $10. There's an X by the Cable in the back. Wonder if the cable is bad. Cable's not bad, as I discovered. But the device is. So these things are actually designed pretty well, as I learned throughout the years. And so you take these 4 screws out, and you pop this open, and then you take this up, and you get in the gut. You get to the guts of the thing. Come on. There we go. Don't want to break the sticker just yet. See, it's pretty well designed. You've got, so on the back of this thing, it looks like a surge. So you got 8 slots and then one in with a 20 amp breaker here. And then a power switch here. And then the mains comes in here after some filtering, it looks like. And then hops over onto this board, which looks like a power supply to power the logic of the system, which is broken into 2 boards. But then this here is the mains bit, and it's very simple. It looks like it's just a few resistors, some support circuitry to drive these relays, which is the part that does the switching on and off, and it's controlled by this header here. So this one is bad. Like, the logic on this is bad, and even if the logic on it were fine, it's kind of insecure. But what I could do is yank all this out and drop in a Raspberry Pi, and I think at some point I will give that a shot. I have a bunch of Raspberry Pi 1s that I have nothing to do with, and this would be a really good use of the device, reuse of the device, because this seems to be in really good shape. I'll want to test it out, but even if some of these relays are bad, replacing relays is no big deal. Is that a 80C186-20? That's a 186. I had no idea this thing was driven by an Intel processor. That's hilarious. I mean, you can see the Ethernet bits. Not really sure what that is. That looks like it might be firmware or flash or something. I'd have to look it up. But, yeah, wow, okay. That's fun. But, yeah, I could just take all this out, drop in a 5-volt power supply, and then power this as a Raspberry Pi 1. And get, okay, basically the same usefulness out of it, but in a more secure manner and with some extensibility. So I might do that at some point. Well, that's all we've got for this episode. I promise next one will be a lot more substantive as we finally dive into the audio side of things, which is something I have been waiting to do for, well, actually since well before this channel began. And I'd like to thank Bess once again for letting me use their music, but I'd also like to thank the people you see below, my patrons. The people who not only allow this channel to exist, but my other podcast projects to exist, and also support the radio station, basically helping me out in everything that I do. If you'd like to be a patron, you can find a link in the description below. Thank you folks very much. I'll see you next episode.